In the heart of the Midwest, where wheat danced like golden waves and time moved like a whisper, Ella Green lived quietly, just a girl, her farm, and the steady rhythm of survival. But everything changed when a stranger, barefoot and bitten, collapsed on her farm. Her instincts took over, and with calloused hands and an unwavering resolve, she fought death itself to keep him breathing. He gave her no name, no story, only a look and a soft thank you before he vanished like a ghost. 7 days later, the impossible happened. The sky above her pasture roared with engines as a private jet descended, sleek, silver, and surreal. The man she saved stepped out, no longer a near-dead hiker, but a billionaire wrapped in silk and secrets. What followed was a whirlwind of mystery, transformation, and unexpected love as Ella's ordinary world collided with extraordinary fate. The wheat was ready. Sunlight rolled over it like honey, casting long shadows as the late afternoon heat pressed down on the land. Ella Green stood at the edge of the field, her worn boots sinking into the dirt, hands on her hips. The wind had settled to a low whisper, carrying the scent of dry earth, wild clover, and the faint promise of rain. This was her rhythm. Quiet days marked by chores, solitude, and the dependable pulse of the seasons. Her farm didn't need much. A little faith, a lot of sweat, and a good eye on the sky. She preferred it this way. No noise, no distractions, no surprises. That's why she noticed him. He didn't belong to the field, didn't sway with the wind like the stalks, or blend into the browns and golds of late summer. He staggered, barefoot, shirt clinging with sweat, eyes wild with confusion. From across the rows, she first thought it was a trick of the light, some heat-warped illusion. But as he collapsed forward, her instincts kicked in. "Hey!" she shouted, already sprinting between rows. He was on his side when she reached him, curled loosely like a child. His skin was slick with sweat and dust, his breathing shallow. Ella si arrodilló, escaneándolo rapidamente. No shoes, no bag. His lips were cracked, and when she touched his shoulder, he flinched, mumbling something she couldn't understand. Then she saw it. His leg, just below the knee, was swollen, the skin tight and angry red. 2 puncture wounds were visible, already ringed in black. Snakebite. The sight chilled her blood. Rattlesnakes weren't common this close to the main fields, but it was summer, and anything could happen. "Stay with me," she whispered, heart pounding. She had no cell service out here, and the nearest neighbor was a mile off. No time to fetch help. It was just her and this stranger, and if she didn't act fast, he'd die right in her field. Ella tore off her bandana and pressed it above the bite, tying it tight to slow the venom. Her mind raced back to every bit of farm medicine her grandfather ever taught her. She fumbled through the pouch she wore, small scissors, a flask of milk, cotton, iodine. With trembling hands, she cleaned the wound, doused it in iodine, and used the knife edge to make a shallow incision, coaxing blood and venom to the surface. She poured the milk over it, the old folk remedy, then packed it with cold earth from beneath the nearest shade tree. He moaned, but didn't wake. She dragged him, inch by inch, across the field toward the barn. It took her nearly 20 minutes, her arms burning, sweat soaking her back. Once inside, she laid him on a pile of hay, ran to fetch water, and sat by his side, sponging his forehead through the long stretch of evening. His fever broke after midnight. He stirred once, eyes fluttering open. "You're okay," she said softly, brushing his damp hair back. His gaze found hers, distant but grateful. You, he rasped, saved me. Ella sonrió, su fatiga olvidada por un momento. Don't thank me yet. You scared the hell out of me. He gave the faintest chuckle, then whispered something barely audible. A name? A place? She leaned in, but it was gone. His eyes drifted closed again. By dawn, the cot was empty. She blinked against the morning light pouring through the slats of the barn wall. He was gone. No footsteps in the dirt, no signs of struggle, just a faint depression in the hay and the memory of those haunted eyes. For a second, she questioned whether he'd even been real. Then she saw it, a gold locket near the hay bale. She picked it up, turning it over in her palm. It was warm from the rising sun and etched with a strange symbol, something foreign, delicate, almost royal. No name, no goodbye, just the ghost of a man and a mystery that refused to be ignored. Ella stared out at her wheat field, now perfectly still again as if nothing had ever happened. But everything had changed. Ella Green had seen her share of injuries on the farm, rusty nail punctures, barbed wire cuts, even a broken collarbone after a runaway mule kicked her brother off a fence. But nothing like this, nothing like him. The stranger's leg pulsed with angry color, swelling by the minute. The 2 puncture wounds beneath his knee were deep, rimmed with bruised black and purple. The veins around it spidered out, dark and furious, like poison drawing a map across his skin. Ella se inclinó sobre él en el campo de trigo, manos temblando. You're gonna be okay, she muttered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. She tightened the tourniquet again, her red bandana cinched just above the bite. His breath came in short bursts. His body trembled in the dirt. Every second felt like a countdown. The farm was too far from town, and cell service had vanished a week ago after a lightning storm fried the nearest tower. That left one option: do it herself. Ella raced toward the barn, sprinting barefoot now, ignoring the prickle of stubble and stray thorns against her feet. Her hands grabbed blindly as she reached the tack room, snatching a small field kit. The flask of goat's milk her grandmother once swore could draw out evil, and her granddad's weathered pocket knife. When she returned, he was still conscious, but only barely. His eyelids fluttered like moth wings, his chest heaving. I need you to stay awake, okay? She said, kneeling beside him. He didn't respond, but his eyes found hers, glinting with something, pain, confusion, maybe trust. Ella had no time to second guess. She poured the milk into a shallow metal dish and dipped a cloth in it, then wiped around the bite. Sorry, she whispered, this might hurt. With the tip of the pocket knife, she made a clean, shallow incision across the fang marks, just enough to let the blood and venom rise. It was a desperate, old-school method, warned against by textbooks, but it was all she had. She pressed the cloth to the wound, massaging outward with slow, firm strokes. The stranger hissed through his teeth, every muscle in his body going taut. I know, she breathed. Hang in there. Once the blood thinned and turned a more normal shade, she packed the site with a wad of cool dirt, then covered it with cotton from the kit. It was crude but clean. Maybe it would buy him some time. She dragged him into the shade of a lone oak tree, watching for any signs of worsening. Vomiting, seizure, unconsciousness. But he stabilized. His breathing eased. He slept. Hours passed. Ella didn't move from his side. The sun dipped lower, and shadows stretched across the land like reaching fingers. Crickets began to sing, and barn swallows dipped in and out of the sky above. The stranger hadn't stirred again. She studied him now, in the quiet. He was lean but not frail, muscles honed by either labor or survival. His hair was dark, damp with sweat, and curled slightly at the edges. His hands were rough but not calloused like a rancher's, more like someone who used them, but not every day. What was a man like this doing barefoot in her field with a snakebite and no explanation? Who just disappears into the middle of a wheat field? Ella's fingers curled into the dirt beside her. She didn't like questions she couldn't answer, and this man, this whole moment, was a riddle dropped from the sky. As dusk settled in, she made the decision. She'd bring him into the barn for the night, safer there, warmer, less exposed. She wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. Using a wheelbarrow padded with blankets, she carefully moved him inside and laid him in the loft, near the old cot her brother used to sleep on during summer nights. He murmured something as she pulled the blanket over him, a word in another language, or maybe just the delirious voice of pain. Ella sat down beside him, arms wrapped around her knees, watching. She wasn't sure if he'd be alive by morning, but one thing she did know: if he was, she was going to find out who he was and why the hell he ended up nearly dead in her field. The night pressed down like a heavy blanket, thick with the chirp of crickets and the hum of distant frogs by the creek. Inside the barn it was cooler, quieter. The faint scent of hay, dust, and horse feed lingered in the rafters. Ella sat by the cot, arms crossed, fighting sleep with every blink. She didn't light a lamp. The moon spilling through the loft window was enough. Shadows shifted softly as she watched over the man, whose name she still didn't know. His chest rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths. The swelling in his leg had eased slightly, and the fever had broken sometime before midnight. Sweat still clung to his forehead, but the danger, at least for now, seemed to have passed. Ella leaned her head back against the wooden beam, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't explain why this mattered so much to her. Strangers came through sometimes, backpackers, hitchhikers, folks chasing freedom or running from something. But this man didn't fit. He had no bag, no water, no survival gear, just bare feet, a poisoned leg, and a presence that felt off, like he didn't belong to the world she knew. At some point, exhaustion took her. She woke up with a start just before dawn. A rooster crowed from the distance. Pale light reached across the barn like a ghostly hand. Ella blinked and looked towards the cot. Empty, her heart slammed into her throat. She leapt to her feet, the hay rustling loudly under her boots. The blanket was tossed aside, rumpled. The makeshift bandage she'd placed on his leg lay discarded on the floor. "No," she whispered, racing toward the ladder. She checked the barn doors. Still closed. Ran outside, called out. Nothing. The field was still. Dew sparkled on the wheat like silver threads. The same field where he had nearly died was once again quiet, peaceful, unchanged. Except now he was gone. She circled the property, checked the well, the shed, even the back road near the fence line. No sign, no footprints in the soft dirt, no sound, just the rising sun and a chill that settled in her gut. She came back to the barn, angry and confused. Who just vanishes without a word? Then, near the pile of hay beside the cot, something glinted. Ella se arrodilló y lo levantó desde la paja. A small gold locket, oval, warm to the touch despite the cool morning air. There was no chain, just the pendant itself, etched with some kind of strange swirling symbol, like a crest or insignia, foreign, elegant. She turned it over, searching for a name, a photo inside. It wouldn't open. "What the hell?" she muttered. Suddenly the events of the last day felt less like a strange encounter and more like the beginning of something bigger. He hadn't just stumbled into her field, and he hadn't left by accident. Ella stared at the locket as if it might whisper the answers she needed. Her fingers traced the strange symbol again and again, but the metal stayed cold and silent in her palm. Who was he? She sat on the porch that morning, a steaming mug of black coffee going cold in her hands, the horizon stretching out endlessly in front of her. The barn loomed in the distance, just another part of the daily routine now wrapped in unanswered questions. No one believed her at the co-op when she stopped by for supplies. "A man in your wheat," old Mr. Kellerman laughed. "Probably a heat mirage." "Could have been a hiker," one of the ranch hands offered. "Snake got him and he wandered off." But she knew what she saw, what she felt. The weight of him when she dragged him into the barn, the raw panic in his eyes, the way he looked at her when he whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't a mirage, and the locket in her pocket was proof of that. By sundown, Ella had combed through every book and old box her grandfather left behind. Nothing matched the symbol. Nothing explained what she had seen. But her gut told her one thing with certainty. He hadn't just survived a snake bite. He had escaped something. And whether he meant to or not, he'd left something behind. A thread. A question. Ella didn't know it yet, but in exactly 7 days, her quiet life would shatter. The engines would come, the jet would land. And the answers she was chasing would come roaring out of the sky. For the next 2 days, Ella couldn't focus. The harvest could wait, the chickens could squawk. But her mind kept drifting back to the barn, the field, the man with no name and the locket that refused to open. She started with the obvious, retracing his path. On the 3rd morning, before the sun had fully climbed the sky, she walked the entire southern boundary of her property. The wheat lay mostly undisturbed, but every now and then she found something, a snapped stalk, a partial footprint, a smear of dried blood against a stone. She followed the trail as best she could. It meandered through the field, veered into a patch of wild thistle, then curved sharply toward the creek. There, on the bank, she found it. A blood-stained cloth, her own bandana, the one she'd tied as a tourniquet, wedged between 2 rocks like someone had deliberately left it behind. He had passed through here, alone, weak, probably limping, but alive. She stood there for a long time, staring at the cloth. A strange, electric feeling crept up her spine. Not fear exactly, but the awareness that she was being watched, or had been. It was no longer just about a man lost in her field. He was hiding from something, and now, maybe, so was she. By the time Ella rolled into town in her rusted pickup that Thursday morning, she hadn't slept a full night in days. The locket sat in her glove compartment wrapped in an old handkerchief. She didn't know what she planned to do with it. Show someone, ask questions, maybe just stare at it with someone else in the room so she could feel a little less crazy. The co-op was bustling. Harvest season always brought people out, ranchers, feed truck drivers, old-timers swapping gossip over gas pumps. Ella nodded at a few familiar faces, grabbed a bag of cracked corn and tried to ignore the looks. they'd heard. Ella Green's got ghost stories now. She overheard one woman whisper near the register, says a man fell from the sky or something. Probably just drunk, another chuckled, or lonely. She clenched her jaw, paid for her feed, and headed back toward the truck until a voice stopped her. "You said he had a snake bite." She turned. Sheriff Morton stood on the sidewalk outside his office, arms crossed, eyes squinting against the sun. "Yeah," Ella replied. "Bad one, swelling, fever, nearly died." "You get a good look at the snake?" She shook her head. "Didn't see it. Just the bite." The sheriff scratched his chin, looking thoughtful. "Strange. Doc Lively called me this morning. Said a man showed up at the county clinic last week with a snake bite like that, but he never gave a name. Said he didn't want treatment, just needed directions to the highway." Ella felt her pulse spike. "You saw him?" "I didn't. Doc did. Said he was walking barefoot, looked half-cooked. Sound like your guy?" It did. All of it did. Sheriff Morton stepped closer. "Ella, I don't know what you got yourself into, but I'd keep quiet about it. Folks around here don't need a story to scare 'em off their own land. And if this man of yours didn't want to be found, well, might be best to let him stay that way." He tipped his hat and walked off. Ella stood frozen by her truck, heart pounding. The man hadn't just wandered off. He'd gone somewhere, deliberately, possibly following a plan, and the sheriff's warning felt less like advice and more like a threat. Whatever had started in her field, it wasn't over, not even close. Back at the farm, Ella couldn't take her eyes off the locket. She'd placed it on the kitchen table, just a small oval shape, delicate and unassuming, but it might as well have been a bomb. The strange engraving on the back caught the light from the window, lines looping like a crest or sigil. She traced them again and again, half expecting the thing to whisper its secrets. It refused to open, no latch, no seam. She'd tried everything short of smashing it with a hammer. Whatever was inside, if anything, was locked away, like the man who dropped it or left it on purpose. Ella pulled out an old magnifying glass from the drawer, the kind her grandfather used to inspect wheat for mites. She studied the markings more closely. Around the edges were tiny letters, faint as a breath. VOC/8.3/9X7. A code? She copied it onto a notepad, circling each segment. She tried every combination online. Nothing, no results. The symbols didn't match any language she knew, certainly not Latin, Cyrillic, or anything local. It was elegant, foreign, and absolutely intentional. She held it to her chest and closed her eyes. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a message. A key. But the lock hadn't revealed itself yet. The days that followed passed slowly, stretched out like canvas over an empty frame. The wheat swayed gently in the breeze. The chickens needed feeding, the tractor needed repair. Ella did it all, like muscle memory, but her mind was always somewhere else. Somewhere between a barefoot man in her field and a locket that refused to speak. The whispers in town had quieted, but she still felt their stares. Strangers don't just vanish, not in places like this. The sheriff hadn't come back around, but the warning in his voice echoed louder each day. Let him stay lost. But how could she? Every night she dreamed of him, the fevered gaze, the way his lips barely formed the word thank you, and always, always the sound of engines overhead, growing louder, coming closer. She'd wake in a cold sweat, the locket clutched in her fist. On the sixth day, she stood in the middle of the field, looking up at the sky, clear blue, wide open, empty, but her gut whispered, "Something's coming." On the seventh day, she rose before the sun, feed the animals, brewed coffee, waited, and then, just before noon, the sky began to roar. It started as a low hum, so faint Ella almost mistook it for the tractor misfiring again. She stood by the fence line, a bucket of feed hanging from one hand, when the sound deepened, spreading through the air like a pulse. Then came the vibration. The ground didn't shake, not exactly, but she felt it deep in her boots. A tension like the air had thickened. The chickens squawked nervously and scattered. The goats at the far end of the pasture huddled together, heads raised. Ella dropped the bucket. She looked up, and there it was. Cutting across the perfect blue of the afternoon sky came a sleek silver jet, low and fast, gleaming like a blade. It wasn't some crop duster or private prop plane. This was high-end, military quiet, corporate sharp, and it was descending toward her. Her mouth went dry. She didn't move, couldn't. The engines roared as the jet tilted, circled once over her field, then lowered its landing gear. Dust and wheat swirled in a cyclone as it approached, touching down with shocking grace. Right in the center of her pasture, flattening golden stalks like they were nothing. Ella shielded her face from the blast of warm wind. Her braid whipped around her shoulder. Her heartbeat thumped loud in her ears. The engines whined down. Silence fell like thunder. The door opened. A staircase descended slowly, hydraulic and smooth, not rushed. She counted 5 long seconds before the first figure emerged. A man in a black suit wearing sunglasses stepped down. His movements were measured, his expression unreadable. He scanned the landscape, then turned and signaled behind him. Another man followed, then a third. They moved with practiced efficiency, each one more out of place in her wheat field than the next. It was like watching a scene from a spy thriller dropped into the middle of her rural life. The lead man finally approached her. "Miss Ella Green?" he asked, voice low and clipped. She swallowed. "Who's asking?" He didn't smile, didn't blink, just offered a card, white, embossed, no company name, just a logo, the same symbol that was etched into the back of the locket. Ella's breath caught. "I'm here on behalf of someone you helped," the man said calmly. "He'd like to see you." She stared past him at the open door of the jet. Sunlight gleamed off its polished frame. Inside, she could just make out a figure standing in the aisle, tall, broad-shouldered face obscured by the shadows. "Is it him?" she asked, not even realizing she'd spoken aloud. The suited man nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Why here?" she whispered. "He said it had to be here, where it started." Ella's heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of her chest. Her world, just a week ago quiet, dusty, small, was now a landing strip for the impossible. The man stepped aside, gesturing to the staircase. "Shall we?" Ella looked down at her dirt-streaked boots, her sun-bleached flannel shirt. She hadn't dressed for destiny, but something inside her, something deeper than fear, said, "Go." She nodded, took a breath, and walked toward the jet. Behind her, the wind picked up, scattering wheat across the flattened earth like gold dust. The door was open. The man she'd saved was waiting, and her life, as she knew it, had just lifted off the ground. The metal stairs were warm beneath Ella's boots. the scent of jet fuel clinging faintly to the air. Her hands gripped the railing as she climbed, heart hammering like a piston in her chest. At the top, the cabin's cool air rushed out to meet her, sterile, scented faintly of leather and citrus. Plush cream seats lined the interior, accented with dark wood and brushed steel. Everything gleamed. It was the kind of place she imagined existed in movies or in the dreams of people who'd never had to mend fences in the rain. The man she'd saved stood near the back, framed by soft cabin light. He wore a tailored suit the color of ash, his posture effortless, his presence commanding. The scrapes and sweat were gone, replaced by quiet authority and unreadable calm. He looked like someone in charge of everything. And yet, his eyes, when they met hers, they weren't cold. They were the same eyes she remembered from the barn, feverish, desperate, human. "Ella," he said. Her name in his voice was a strange comfort, a tether to the moment they shared, even if the world around them had turned upside down. She didn't speak. One of the suited men gestured politely. "Please, take a seat. We'll be in the air shortly." "In the air?" Ella blinked. "Where are we going?" The man she saved, now standing just a few feet from her, spoke again. "Somewhere safe, and somewhere that will make sense of this, I promise." The others said nothing. They simply moved with silent precision, shutting doors, checking panels, preparing for takeoff. It was clear who mattered here. Ella sat. The leather hugged her shoulders. A chilled glass of water appeared at her elbow, brought by someone she hadn't even noticed. Everything was perfectly orchestrated, except her. She looked at him again. "You never told me your name." He gave a small, tired smile. "I will. I just wanted to make sure you'd come first." Outside, the engines whirred to life, and the jet began to move. The sky outside the window turned from blue to pale gold as the jet ascended, climbing effortlessly over the wide plains of Ella's world. She leaned back, silent, watching her farm disappear into a speck below. Part of her wanted to jump. The other part knew there was no going back. Across from her, the man now sat with his jacket off and collar loosened, watching her quietly. "You saved my life," he said after a long pause, "and I disappeared without a word. That wasn't fair." "You think?" Ella dijo secamente, doblando sus brazos. "You almost died in my field. I patched you up with milk, dirt, and prayers, and then you were gone. Like magic." He gave a soft chuckle. "I had to vanish for your safety and mine." "From what?" He studied her for a beat. "People who don't like when secrets get too close to the light." She raised a brow. "Are you going to tell me who you really are?" "I will, soon, but not here." He leaned forward slightly. "There are places where walls have ears, even at 30,000 feet. She narrowed her eyes, still skeptical. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, flat box. When he opened it, she gasped. It was the locket, her locket, the one she'd found in the barn. But this one was open. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a chip, not a photo, not jewelry, a microdrive, the kind you didn't just carry for decoration. He slid it across the table. "This belonged to someone who died trying to warn me. They planted it on me, hoping someone, anyone, would help if I fell." Ella stared at it, then back at him. "You weren't just sick from a snake bite, were you?" "No," he said quietly. "I was poisoned. The snake was part of it. The rest, is a story I want you to hear, but only if you're willing. Willing, he gestured to the jet, to go with me, to hear it all, to step into my world. Ella looked at the chip again, then out the window at the fading horizon. Something deep inside her stirred, a whisper of the same instinct that told her not to let him die. She looked back at him. Okay, tell me everything. The jet sliced through the clouds like a knife, smooth and fast. Ella pressed her fingers against the window, watching endless miles of sky roll by in quiet majesty. Somewhere far below, her farm faded into memory, swallowed by the curve of the earth. She should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt suspended between who she was and who she might become, between dust and steel, fields and glass. Across from her, the man, still nameless, remained calm. He worked silently on a tablet, stylus in hand, his every motion precise. A man used to control. Ella had seen him vulnerable, near death, broken by fever and venom. Now he was a different version of himself, sharper, colder, composed. But something in his eyes was still remembered. Eventually he set the tablet aside and looked up. This flight is just under 3 hours, he said. We'll land in the city, undisclosed location. You'll be safe there. Safe from what? Ella asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he tapped the micro drive, the same one once sealed in the locket. This holds data someone died to get. Names, code, digital fingerprints. It exposes the core of a corporate conspiracy that controls billions. Her eyebrows lifted, and they tried to kill you for it. He nodded. They failed. But they're still watching. And you think a farm girl can help you bring them down? I don't need help, he said softly. I need the truth. And I trust you. That silenced her. No one had said that to Ella in years, maybe ever. You have a strange way of asking for trust, she muttered, glancing around the luxury cabin. I don't bring many people on this jet, he replied. You're the only one who's ever seen me when I wasn't in control. She met his gaze, steady now. Then tell me your name. A beat of silence passed between them. The engines hummed. The jet soared. Finally, he said, Rafael. Rafael Calderon. The name hit her like a quiet shockwave. She knew that name. Everyone did. One of the most powerful tech CEOs in the world. Reclusive, rumored, paranoid, possibly dangerous. And she'd pulled him half dead from her field. The jet descended as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting fire across the clouds. The city came into view like a promise and a warning, towering spires of glass and steel rising from the earth, lit by streaks of neon and gold. It was nothing like the simple buildings of her small town. This was a living machine, a giant made of lights and secrets. Ella's breath caught as they glided between skyscrapers and over private helipads. The landing strip was hidden on a rooftop, one with a polished surface that reflected the aircraft like a mirror. As the wheels touched down, Raphael leaned toward her. This building is mine. The upper floors are sealed, secure. We'll have privacy. Privacy, she repeated. Sounds like you're used to being hunted. He didn't argue. They disembarked swiftly, ushered by the same quiet men in dark suits. But this time there were no greetings, no formalities, just a silent escort into a glass elevator that rose so fast it made her ears pop. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world. The penthouse stretched wide, Open space, soft lighting, walls of uninterrupted glass. The city lights blinked all around them, like stars too close to touch. Art hung on the walls, books lined real wooden shelves. In one corner, a grand piano sat silent beneath a suspended crystal light fixture. It was sterile and beautiful. But beneath it all was something lonely. "This is where you live?" Ella asked. Raphael nodded. "It's where I wait." "For what?" He turned to face her fully now. No distance, no evasion. "For someone who won't sell my secrets, someone who sees the truth, and someone who knows what it means to save a life, even if she never asked for what came after." Ella no hablo. She walked to the window and looked out at the ocean of lights, the humming streets far below, the sky that had carried her from dust to destiny. She didn't belong here, not really, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't looking for a way out. She was waiting to see what came next. The silence inside the penthouse was a different kind of quiet, polished, curated, intentional. It wasn't like the hum of cicadas on a warm night or the creak of old barn wood settling in the wind. It was a silence made of money and secrets. Ella walked slowly across the polished floor, her boots making soft thuds that seemed too loud in the vastness of it all. She stopped near the grand window where the entire city pulsed like circuitry. She didn't belong here, not among the glass and chrome and ghostly quiet. But when she turned, Raphael was watching her, not as the billionaire recluse the world feared, but as the man she'd found crumpled in her wheat field. There was still a flicker of fragility in his eyes, something real beneath the armor. She gestured to the view. "So this is what the sky looks like from the other side." Raphael gave a half smile. "It's high, but not always clear." He motioned for her to sit on a sleek leather couch. A tray of tea and fruit already waited, another sign that nothing in his world was unplanned, except maybe her. "So," she said, settling in, "now that I'm here, are you finally going to explain how a barefoot billionaire almost died in my field?" Raphael sat across from her, elbows on knees, gaze level. "I wasn't supposed to be there," he began. "I was on the run. Not from the law, but from the people who once worked for me." He paused as if weighing how much to reveal. "A month ago I uncovered a breach. Not just embezzlement or fraud, something far deeper. Code embedded in our flagship operating systems, surveillance grade. Hidden instructions that could activate microphones, cameras, even financial triggers. It was buried so deep only a handful of engineers could have planted it. And they were under someone's protection." Ella leaned in, heart racing. "So what did you do?" "I tried to pull the code, shut it down quietly, but someone tipped them off. Within hours, I was being followed. My communications were compromised. My own board questioned my stability." He rubbed his hands together, the first real sign of nerves. "The snake bite was poetic, I suppose. I fled into a remote country to lose a tail, and nature tried to finish the job they couldn't." "And you ended up bleeding in a stranger's field," she said quietly. He nodded. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask questions. You just acted." Ella looked down at her hands. "I didn't do it for a reward, you know." "I know," he said. "That's why I came back." The room was quiet again, but no longer cold. Something unspoken stretched between them. Tension, yes, but also trust. Raphael stood and walked to a small shelf by the wall. He picked up a photo, studied it for a moment, then handed it to Ella. A woman, smiling, strong features similar to his. Younger Raphael beside her, barely recognizable without the weight in his eyes. "My sister," he said. "She died 2 years ago. She was the one who discovered the first hint of the buried code. I dismissed it, told her she was being paranoid. A month later, she was found drowned. The official story was an accident." "But you don't believe that?" "No," he said flatly. "And I've been chasing the truth ever since." Ella handed the photo back. "And the locket?" "She had it made. Said if anything happened to her, she wanted someone outside the system to find it. You were that someone." She exhaled slowly. It was too big to wrap her head around. Corporate espionage, buried code, death disguised as coincidence. But her gut told her it was real. Raphael sat beside her now, not close, but closer. "I know this isn't your world," he said softly, "but you're in it now, and I don't think I can face what's coming alone." Ella looked at him, truly looked at him. Not the suit, not the skyline behind him, just the man. "You're not alone," she said. And in that moment, everything changed again. For the first time since stepping onto the jet, Ella felt like she had her footing. The city still overwhelmed her. Too fast, too bright, too loud even in silence. But inside Raphael's penthouse, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to connect. And the man at the center of it all, once a barefoot stranger on the edge of death, was becoming something more than a mystery. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, Raphael moved through the kitchen with surprising ease. He handed her a steaming cup of tea, fresh mint and honey, not something she expected from someone with 4 assistants on speed dial. He sat across from her again. "I owe you my life," he said without ceremony. Ella rolled her eyes slightly. "Don't make it sound like a contract." He didn't smile. "It's not a contract. It's a fact. If you hadn't acted, I would have died out there, and everything I'm trying to expose, the people watching me, the network buried in our own systems, it would have died with me." She sipped the tea. "Then I guess it's good I didn't hesitate. You did more than act. You trusted me, when you had every reason not to." Ella looked out the window. "That's just who I am, I guess. That's why I brought you here." He stood and walked to a drawer, unlocking it with a thumbprint. Inside was a thick dossier, paper, not digital. He slid it across the table to her. "What's this?" she asked. "Everything I've gathered. Names, transactions, data trails. I want you to be the second person in the world to see it, after me." Ella frunció el ceño. "Why me?" "Because you don't owe anyone. You don't have a stake in the companies, no agenda, no reason to sell it, suppress it, or spin it." She opened the folder slowly. The first page was a diagram. Boxes connected with arrows, each labeled with names and divisions. She recognized some of them. Major tech firms, defense contractors, even a media conglomerate. "You're telling me all of these are connected?" she asked. "Yes, and they've been funneling user data, manipulating public sentiment, even shaping elections. The code my sister found, it was just the start." Ella's hands tightened on the folder. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I know," Raphael said, "but you may be the only one I can trust to help end it." Night had fallen over the city, and the penthouse lights dimmed automatically, casting a warm amber glow across the space. The sounds of traffic and sirens echoed faintly below, but up here, the world felt still. Raphael stood near the window now, a dark figure against the stars. Ella stayed at the table, still paging through the dossier. The information was overwhelming. Redacted memos, internal messages, digital forensic breakdowns. If even half of it was real, it would blow a hole through the center of the modern tech world. She finally asked the question lingering in her chest. "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" Raphael turned. "I did. 2 years ago. The report disappeared within 48 hours. The whistleblower I used vanished. And suddenly I was under psychological evaluation from my own board. They tried to brand me as unstable, unfit to lead." Ella shook her head. "And now? Now they think I'm gone. The snakebite gave me a window. I faked my death digitally, scrambled metadata, deleted my geolocation trail. This version of me," he gestured to himself, "doesn't officially exist right now. You're a ghost with unfinished business." He came back to the table, sat across from her again, quieter now. "My family name, Calderon, used to mean something. Old money, old science. But we lost ourselves in tech. My father was brilliant and cold. My sister was the soul of it all. When she died, I stopped caring about profit." He met her eyes. "Now I just want justice." Ella didn't respond right away. She reached for the locket, now open and resting between them. "Then let's start with this," she said. "Let's finish what your sister started." Raphael nodded, no hesitation. "Together?" She held out her hand. Together. Ella had wondered for days if the snakebite had been an accident. Now she knew better. Raphael pulled up a file on his secure terminal, layers of encrypted folders, each guarded by biometric scans and voice commands. The screen flickered to life, showing images of medical reports, maps, and, most chillingly, a snake. "This," Raphael said, pointing, "is a Bothrops insularis, the golden lancehead, one of the most venomous pit vipers in the world, native to a single island off the coast of Brazil. There are fewer than 400 left in the wild." Ella blinked. "That's not the kind of snake that just wanders onto a farm in North America." "Exactly," he said. "It didn't wander. It was planted." He tapped again. A grainy photo appeared, security footage from the trail cameras he'd had hidden in the countryside during his escape. In one of the frames, barely visible through brush and shadow, was a man in tactical gear holding a black case. "An assassin?" Ella asked, stunned. "An operative," Raphael corrected. "Sent to intercept me before I could reach a contact. When I broke from my planned route, I outpaced him, but not before he let loose his weapon." She stared at the screen, at the snake, at the implication. "They used a snake to kill you?" He nodded. "It leaves no trace. Natural causes, no bullet, no signature, just bad luck." Ella felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "And if I hadn't found you?" "They'd assume success. My enemies would stop hunting. The narrative would close." "But you didn't die." "No," he said, locking eyes with her. "Because of you." A heavy silence settled over the room. Ella didn't know what scared her more. That someone had wanted Raphael dead so badly they used a rare biological weapon, or that she had unknowingly become part of a war she couldn't even see yet. "They're still out there," she said. He nodded once. and they know I'm not. By morning, Ella was different, not in how she looked. She was still wearing her faded jeans, flannel shirt, and stubborn braid, but in how she moved. There was weight behind her footsteps now, purpose behind her words. She had stepped through the looking glass and found her footing on the other side. Raphael noticed, as they sat side by side reviewing the data package, files too dangerous to keep in one place, too powerful to upload without protection. He glanced at her and said, "You've changed." Ella raised an eyebrow. "Because I haven't run away screaming yet." "Number, because you're not acting like someone who stumbled into this. You're acting like someone meant to be here." She didn't laugh it off this time. She didn't deny it. "I spent my whole life working a farm," she said, "fixing things with duct tape and wire, making things last. Most people think that's all I'll ever do, but I've had to solve problems with nothing but my hands and grit since I was 12. She paused, looking at the coded flowchart on the screen. This is just another kind of broken fence, and someone's been hiding the bolt cutters." Raphael stared at her with something like admiration. "Then maybe I found the right person after all." Ella stood, stretching her back, then walked to the giant window overlooking the city. "They don't know I'm part of this, do they?" "Number, not yet." "Good," she said, narrowing her eyes, "because I think we've got one hell of a head start." And for the first time since the jet landed in her field, Raphael smiled without reservation. She wasn't just the farm girl who saved him anymore. She was his only ally, his secret weapon, and the war was just beginning. The next morning the penthouse was quiet, but the energy had changed. Raphael had vanished into one of his secure rooms, coordinating something on encrypted channels. Ella no pregunto. She trusted he was doing what needed to be done. She made coffee herself, leaned over the balcony rail, and tried to breathe normally with a skyline pressing in on her. When Raphael returned, he didn't come empty-handed. He carried a small black case, sleek, matte, unmarked. It reminded her of the one that held the snake, but there was no menace in his eyes today, only intent. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside was a tablet, a contract folder, a sleek silver key fob, and a deed. "What's this?" she asked, already suspicious. "A gift," he said, "and a backup plan." "For what?" "In case something happens to me," he said. "The car this fob opens is armored. The tablet is a secure node, loaded with everything we've collected, plus offline resources. The deed is to a property, not here, not public. It's off-grid, self-sustaining. Yours if you want it." Ella blinked. "Why?" "Because people like me think ahead. And because people like you shouldn't be left with nothing." She stared at the folder, unsure whether to be grateful or insulted. "You think I'm going to run?" "No," he said. "I think you're going to fight, but every soldier deserves a shield." Ella cerró la tapa lentamente. "I don't want this because I saved you. I want to be here because you trust me." He nodded. "That's why I'm giving it to you." And with that, the line between survival and strategy became very, very real. That afternoon, Raphael insisted they go out. Not through the main entrance, of course. Not with cameras and drones and the endless speculation surrounding his supposed disappearance. They exited through a private lift, rode in a car with reflective glass, and emerged in an underground entrance to a gallery in the city's art district. It was the most extravagant thing Ella had ever seen. Walls made of water and glass, digital sculptures suspended in air, paintings that shimmered as if alive, people in clothes that cost more than her entire yearly budget for feed. Raphael walked beside her without pretense, blending in yet standing out in his own quiet way. She watched how people turned when he passed, some curious, others in awe. No one recognized her, and she preferred it that way. At one point he stopped before a painting of a lone tree standing in the middle of a scorched plain. The branches were heavy with blooms. The ground was ash. "Why this one?" she asked. "It reminds me of you," he said. She flushed. "That sounds poetic." "It's practical," he said. "Strong roots, new growth. You bloom where no one expects it." Later, they had dinner on a rooftop. The plates were delicate, the wine expensive, the view a masterpiece of concrete and light. But Ella couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying on a life that didn't quite fit. She looked at Raphael across the table and asked, "Do you really live like this every day?" "I used to," he said, "but now I'm not sure I want to." "Why not?" He watched her for a long moment, then said simply, "Because you reminded me what it's like to live for something real." And in that moment, surrounded by all the glamour of a world she didn't understand, Ella felt something more powerful than wealth. She felt seen. The private car dropped her off at the edge of her own land. The road was just as dusty as she'd left it. The sky just as open. The wheat had grown taller, ready for harvest. Her boots sank into familiar soil, and as Ella stepped onto the porch of her farmhouse, it was like waking from a strange dream. Except it wasn't a dream. She'd flown on a jet, held secrets that could topple governments, and stood eye to eye with a man the world feared and revered. And now she was back in a house with creaky steps, a rattling screen door, and a coffee pot that still hissed when it heated. She spent that evening checking her animals, walking the fence line, and letting the silence settle into her bones again. It was grounding, humbling, real, and yet something was different. She was different. Her hands still knew how to mend wire and toss hay, but her mind spun with code maps, corporate trails, and conversations about ethics, power, and truth. Her world had widened, and there was no unlearning it. Raphael had offered her escape, but Ella had chosen to return, to remember who she was before the sky opened above her pasture. Because if she was going to help tear down giants, she had to keep her feet on solid ground. Exactly 7 days later, Ella woke to the sound of wind chimes tinkling on the porch. It was early, barely past dawn. The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, casting stripes across the worn wood floors. She sipped her coffee, watched the trees sway, and smiled at the familiar peace. Then she heard it, the low rumble. Not a truck, not the wind, but engines, high, smooth, powerful. Her breath caught. She walked outside, mug in hand, and squinted at the horizon. There it was again, a gleam in the sky, a sleek silver jet arcing across the clouds. Slower this time, deliberate, and then, just like before, it descended. The same field, the same landing, but this time she didn't freeze. Ella walked out to meet it. The wheat bent in graceful waves around her as the jet touched down, kicking up dust. The engines powered down, the staircase unfolded, but instead of a team of suited men, only one figure stepped out. Raphael. No entourage, no security, just him. He carried something wrapped in linen, a basket, maybe. When he reached her, he offered a small, crooked smile. "I brought breakfast," he said. "Ella Rio." "You flew a jet for eggs and coffee." "No," he replied, meeting her eyes. "I flew a jet for you." And with that, under the rising sun and over the soil that once saved his life, everything between them felt real again. The jet was silent, the field was golden, the jet was gone again by midday. Raphael hadn't stayed long, just a quiet breakfast on the porch, some fresh fruit, his coffee black, and that calm way he had of making everything feel intentional. They hadn't spoken much about the data, the threats, or the code, just the view, the quiet, the way the wheat moved like water in the morning breeze. It was the first time Ella had seen him rest. After he left, the silence returned. Not empty, but watchful, the kind of silence that follows a change you can't quite name yet. That evening, as the wind picked up and the sky turned lavender with dusk, she spotted something stuck in the gatepost at the end of her drive. Tucked under the old rusted hinge was a sealed envelope, weighted down with a rock. There was no name on the front, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. R. Calderon. Ella sat on her porch steps as the sun dipped behind the trees and opened it. Inside was a short letter, handwritten in ink so smooth it looked like it belonged in a museum. "Ella, you once said you didn't want anything from me except the truth. So here it is. You've become my compass. The one person I know won't twist this story for profit or fear. I trust you more than anyone I've ever met, and that scares me. But I've learned that real things, the kind that matter, usually do scare us. This isn't over, and when it's time to take the next step, I'll need you beside me, not because you saved me, but because you're the only one who knows what it means to fight without needing applause. Until then, watch the skies." Ella dobló la carta cuidadosamente, la metió en el bolsillo del pecho de su camisa y miró hacia afuera sobre su tierra. No promises, no timelines, just a connection hanging between them like the stillness before a storm. 2 days later, Ella was in the barn mending a broken latch when she heard the gravel crunch in the driveway. No engines overhead, no jet, just a low hum and the soft purr of tires on dirt. She walked out, squinting into the late afternoon sun. A black SUV, a quiet one, civilian grade, pulled up beside the house. No tinted windows, no guards. The door opened, and Raphael stepped out. No suit, no polished shoes, just jeans, boots, and a plain black shirt that looked slightly wrinkled as if he'd sat on the edge of a bed, wondering if he'd made the right choice coming here. Ella cruzó sus brazos y inclinó su cabeza. "No plane this time?" He smiled. "Thought I'd try a less dramatic entrance." She nodded toward the barn. "Hope you're not just here for coffee again. The fence posts need replacing." He shrugged. "I've got hands." "You sure?" "I don't think those hands have seen a splinter since high school. I'm a fast learner." That afternoon, under the hot sun and surrounded by the creak of wood and the call of crows overhead, Ella and Raphael mended fence posts side by side. No tech, no secrets, just labor, sweat, and small smiles exchanged between hammer strikes. It was the closest thing to peace either of them had felt in months. And as the shadows grew long, they didn't talk about the past or the dangers ahead. They just existed, together in the dirt in the moment. The girl from the farm, the man from the sky, both holding things together. By the third fence post, Raphael's hands were blistered. Ella noticed but didn't say anything. He wasn't the kind of man who needed to be protected from a little pain, and he wasn't complaining either, not even as sweat ran down his temple and his palms turned raw. "Hit it like you mean it," she said, handing him the next iron spike. He grinned. "I'm trying. These things fight back." "Good. Means they'll last." They worked in rhythm. Digging, aligning, hammering. The afternoon sun baked the earth beneath them, the air thick with the scent of dust, wood, and sweat. It was the kind of day most billionaires probably avoided, but Raphael didn't seem to mind. In fact, he looked like he needed it. Ella se limpió la frente con la parte posterior de su manga. "This is what I do most days. Just fix what's broken." Raphael nodded, hammering another spike into place. "You do it better than most people I've met who build entire empires." She chuckled. "Yeah, but my empire's got chickens and a tractor with a dying alternator." He leaned on the fence post and looked at her. "More serious now? That's what makes it real." Ella didn't quite know what to say to that, so she grabbed the next beam and kept working. And as the hours passed, the space between them closed, not with words, but with sweat, effort, and a strange, quiet understanding. They finished the last post just as the wind shifted. Ella's eyes lifted to the horizon. The sky had turned an unnatural greenish-gray, clouds thickening like bruises above the tree line. "Storm's coming," she said, already walking toward the barn. "Big one." Raphael followed, and when the first rumble of thunder cracked the sky, they both broke into a run. The rain hit hard, sheets of it cold and fast. By the time they reached the storm shelter behind the barn, they were soaked through. Ella swung the heavy door open, and they climbed down into the cool, dry dark. Inside, a single bulb buzzed to life. Metal shelves lined the walls, stocked with canned goods, tools, and emergency supplies. An old cot sat in the corner. They stood there, dripping, breathing hard, the air thick with the smell of earth and dust and lightning. Raphael ran a hand through his wet hair and laughed softly. "Well, not exactly how I imagined the day ending." Ella reached for a towel and tossed it to him. "You imagined fence posts. But I imagined being here." She stilled. "You did?" He nodded, serious now. "I didn't come back because I had to. I came because I couldn't stay away." A beat of silence. Then another crack of thunder shook the walls, and instinctively they both looked up. The storm raged above, chaotic, untamed. "You're not like the people I know," he said. "You don't lie to impress. You don't pretend to be someone else. You just are." "I've got nothing to prove," she said quietly. "Not anymore." He stepped closer, rain still glistening on his shoulders. "Then why do I feel like I've been trying to prove something to you ever since you found me?" Ella looked up at him, into him, and for the first time she didn't feel out of place in his world. Because here, under the earth, with no pretense, they were just two people sheltering from a storm. "No one's ever told me they needed me," she said. "Not like this." "I don't just need you," Raphael said, voice low, raw. "I see you." And in the flickering light, with the world rattling above them, neither moved. Neither spoke, but something settled between them. not just safety, something dangerously close to home. The storm passed sometime after midnight, but Ella and Raphael didn't leave the shelter. They sat on opposite sides of the cot, a single blanket shared between them. Neither slept, neither needed to. Something about the thunder and the weight of the moment had stirred too much to simply drift away. Every now and then they would speak soft things, stories, memories. Ella talked about losing her parents young, learning the language of animals before the language of people. Raphael spoke about boarding schools, the loneliness of privilege, and how silence became his only real companion. But then came the silences between the words, and those spoke louder. There was a gravity now, unspoken, electric, not quite a confession, not yet a touch, but something that lived in the space between their shoulders and the way they breathed when the other wasn't looking. Ella turned to face him in the dim light. "Do you ever think this all happened for a reason?" He met her gaze. "I've had everything money could buy, but nothing felt like purpose until I collapsed in your field." She said nothing, but her hand brushed him for just a second. It was enough. They didn't kiss, didn't need to. The spark didn't need fire yet. It just needed to be real. And in that quiet, with the storm behind them, it finally was. The next morning brought clear skies and golden light. The world was fresh, rinsed, and clean. Ella stepped out of the shelter first, the earth damp beneath her boots. Raphael followed, his jacket slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning the horizon with something like peace. They didn't speak much during breakfast, not from awkwardness, but from understanding. Some things didn't need to be said, not after a night like that. Later that afternoon, Raphael made a call. Short, encrypted, serious. Ella escuchó lo suficiente para captar frases clave. Fase 2, programa de lanzamiento y confirmación del sitio piloto. When he hung up, he turned to her with a strange smile. "I want to invest in something." Ella raised a brow. "You already own half the world." "Not like this. I want to start a foundation, rural tech development, sustainability, food independence, and I want your farm to be the first project." She blinked. "Why here?" "Because this is where I learned what survival really looks like, and because I believe the future starts in forgotten places." She leaned against the porch post, arms crossed. "So you're going to make me your co-founder?" "I already have." Ella looked out over her land, hers still, but now filled with potential beyond her own survival. "All right," she said, "let's plant something new." And from that moment forward, the soil beneath her feet wasn't just earth. It was the foundation of a future they'd build together. It started small, just a few solar panels installed behind the barn, a new well pump powered by wind, and a sleek, self-regulating greenhouse that looked like something dropped from a spaceship. But word spread fast. People from town began stopping by, first out of curiosity, then with questions, then with notebooks. How does it irrigate without running lines? Is that a compost battery? Wait, you can grow citrus there. Ella found herself explaining things she'd barely learned a week ago. Raphael's engineers had stayed quiet in the background, letting her be the face. That was intentional. This wasn't about a billionaire fixing a rural town from a penthouse. It was about a farm girl with dirt under her nails who dared to imagine her land doing more than survive. And the press noticed. At first, a small regional newspaper ran the headline, "Farm Girl Builds the Future, Literally." Then came the tech blogs, then a major national outlet. Offers rolled in, sponsorships, interviews, even a television segment. Ella turned down most of them. The story wasn't about her. It was about what could grow when someone gave you the tools and walked away. But even as the spotlight circled, she stayed rooted in the land. Every morning she still checked her fences, still fed her animals, still walked the rows of her wheat field as if listening to something ancient. And when people asked how it all began, she'd smile and say, "With a snake, a stranger, and a choice not to look away." The foundation launched 6 weeks later. Root Cycle, restoring power to the ground. Its mission was simple: equip overlooked communities with scalable tech, local mentorship, and sustainable systems. No red tape, no massive oversight, just solutions that worked, right where they were needed most. Ella was the heart of it. Raphael was the shield. Together they traveled to the high plains of Montana, the flood-racked deltas of Mississippi, the desert edges of Arizona. Every place had its own version of Ella, someone with strength, grit, and no help from the system. She saw pieces of herself in them, and now she could do what no one had done for her: empower. Their partnership evolved, as did their bond. They were never showy, no paparazzi shots, no red carpets, just quiet glances during meetings, hands brushing during long flights, shared silences under starlit skies when neither could sleep. One night, after a community dinner in New Mexico, Raphael handed her a small, soft box. "No strings," he said. Inside was a simple ring, silver, unpolished, etched with the same pattern from the locket. Ella slipped it on. She didn't need a wedding, didn't need a headline. She just needed him and the soil beneath them, firm enough to grow anything they chose. Together they weren't just building systems, they were building a life. It had been nearly a year to the day since the jet first touched down on Ella's field. Back then, it was an alien sight, too sharp, too foreign, too loud for a place where tractors and windmills ruled the sky. Now it descended like a friend returning home, kicking up less dust and far fewer questions. The whole town had been invited, not officially, of course, but word travels fast in places like this, and when a man like Rafael Calderon chooses a wheat field for a wedding, it's hard to keep that quiet. The chairs were hand-built from reclaimed wood. The altar was just a trellis wrapped in wild flowers. Ella's dress wasn't white. It was soft earth tones, simple linen, hand-stitched by the local seamstress who'd known her since she was 8. And Raphael, he wore boots, real ones. As the jet settled behind the tree line, out of sight but never out of mind, Ella stood barefoot in the grass, waiting under the arch, hands clasped behind her back, smiling. He came to her not like a billionaire or a ghost from another world, but as the man she saved, and the man who saved her right back. They didn't say vows for the cameras. They didn't even have cameras, just witnesses, just wind, just the soft rustle of wheat that whispered, "This is where it began, and where everything begins again." People talked for years about the girl who pulled a stranger from death with nothing but grit and instinct, but Ella never saw it that way. The bite, the venom, the fever, the fear, it wasn't the crisis. It was the ignition. A spark that cracked 2 separate worlds wide open and dared them to collide. What had started as a chance encounter in a sunburnt field had become a revolution of purpose. not just in tech or sustainability, but in human connection, in trust. She had saved Raphael's life, yes, but he had given her something she didn't know she'd been missing: a stage for her strength, a mirror for her fire, and the space to grow without compromise. Together they turned a forgotten farm into the first page of a new story, one where innovation didn't erase the past, but rose from it, one where roots and wires could coexist, one where kindness didn't need a price tag to change the world. Every now and then, Ella would sit on her porch and watch the sky, not in fear, but in wonder, because once a man fell from it, and when he stood again, she stood beside him, not as his rescuer, but as his equal. The morning came soft and golden. Ella stepped outside with a mug of coffee in hand, bare feet brushing the cool boards of the porch. The wheat swayed gently in the breeze, humming its timeless song. Somewhere behind the barn, Raphael's voice drifted up. He was fixing the water sensor again, muttering to himself about low batteries and lazy goats. She smiled. It had been over a year since the man with no name collapsed in her field, barefoot, broken, and bitten by more than just venom. In that moment, she hadn't seen a billionaire or a fugitive or a man of power. She'd just seen someone dying and made the choice to act. Everything since then, the jet, the secrets, the storms, the revolution they built brick by brick, had grown from that one instinctual act of human decency. Now her world was larger, louder, filled with names she couldn't pronounce and systems she never imagined she'd be part of. But it was also still hers. The soil hadn't changed. The wind still kissed the wheat the same way. And the sky still watched quietly above it all. Only now, when it roared, it brought someone home. She walked to the garden where Raphael was kneeling, smudged with dirt, hands in the soil. He looked up, grinning. "Are you checking on me?" "Just making sure you don't rewire the tomatoes again," she teased. He stood and kissed her forehead, then dusted off his hands. "We've got the Wind Lake site going live next week." "I know. You still want to come?" Ella didn't answer right away. She looked out over the land, breathing in the air that had once held nothing but solitude, and now held memory, promise, and something close to destiny. "I'll always come back here," she said. "But yeah, let's keep going." They stood side by side in the dirt, boots pressing into the earth that had saved him and shaped her, the sun stretching long across the land. Love didn't land with the jet. It grew seed by seed, quiet, strong, rooted deep, and as they walked back toward the house, laughing at something neither would remember later, the sky above held no secrets anymore, just light, just home.